In October 1978, 15-year-old Carmen Ortega walked home from choir practice in Amarillo, Texas, humming the songs she'd just rehearsed. She was the responsible one, the girl who helped her mother with her younger brothers, who dreamed of joining the all-state choir, who never missed curfew. But that Friday evening, she never made it home. Police found only a blood-stained hair ribbon near the roadside. Without modern forensic technology, the case went cold within months. Carmen's mother, Maria, waited for 46 years, sitting at her window every evening, never knowing what happened to her daughter. Then, in 2023, a detective discovered the old evidence box in a basement archive. DNA testing revealed something remarkable. Mixed with Carmen's blood on that ribbon was DNA from someone else. When investigators finally identified the source, the truth would shock everyone who'd followed the case. The answer had been there all along, documented and filed away, waiting 45 years for the technology to catch up. What makes Carmen Ortega's case truly haunting isn't just the decades of silence or even the eventual breakthrough. It's discovering how close the investigation had come to the truth in 1978, and how one overlooked detail changed everything. Before we dive into this story, please subscribe to the channel. Cases like Carmen's stayed silent for decades, buried in basement archives, but your support helps bring them back into the light, giving voice to those who've waited far too long to be heard. November 2023. The records room of the Amarillo Police Department sat 3 floors below street level, a concrete vault where fluorescent tubes hummed against water-stained ceiling tiles. Detective Marcus Webb stood before Row J, Section 9, his breath visible in the climate-controlled air. He'd been down here for 2 hours, pulling boxes for the department's digital archive initiative, a project nobody wanted but the grant required. His fingers stopped on a box marked differently from the others. While most were labeled with crisp laser-printed stickers, this one bore a handwritten tag in faded blue ink. Case 780847MP. Ortega, C. Unsolved. Webb lifted the box. Light. Too light for a proper investigation file. He set it on the metal sorting table, the sound echoing through the basement silence, and opened it. Inside, 1 manila folder, water-spotted at the edges. 3 Polaroid photographs, colors shifted to unnatural yellows and greens. A plastic evidence bag containing what looked like a child's hair ribbon, red, though time had turned it rust brown. And beneath it all, a handwritten note on department letterhead dated March 1979. The note was brief. Dear Harrison, DNA testing may be viable in future. Preserve all biological evidence per attached protocol. R. Martinez, CSI. Webb held the note up to the light. Someone in 1979 had been thinking 40 years ahead. He opened the folder. The first page showed a school photograph. A girl, maybe 15, with dark eyes and a careful smile, wearing what looked like a choir uniform. Beneath the photo, typed on an old manual typewriter, Carmen Maria Ortega, age 15, last seen October 14, 1978, presumed runaway. Presumed runaway. Webb had been a cop long enough to know what that meant in 1978. It meant they'd stopped looking. He pulled out his phone, photographed the case number, and carried the box upstairs to his desk. The grant could wait. Someone had left him a message from 1979, and Detective Richard Martinez, whoever he was, had believed this case could be solved someday. That someday might be now. Amarillo, Texas. October 1978. The Panhandle that autumn was all golden light and early cold. By 4 in the afternoon, the sun hung low over the flat prairie, stretching shadows long across the streets of the North Heights neighborhood. The houses here were modest, single-story ranch homes with carports and chain-link fences, built in the boom after the war when everyone wanted their own piece of land and sky. Carmen Ortega lived with her mother and 2 younger brothers in a pale green house on North Hughes Street. At 15, she was the responsible one, the one who made sure her brothers had lunch money, who reminded her mother about parent-teacher conferences, who did her homework at the kitchen table while dinner cooked on the stove. Her teachers at Palo Duro High School said she was quiet but diligent, the kind of student who turned in every assignment on time, who asked thoughtful questions, who seemed older than her years. On Friday, October 13th, Carmen had choir practice after school. She sang alto in the Palo Duro Singers, a select group that performed at school assemblies and community events. That afternoon, they were rehearsing for the Veterans Day program, running through America the Beautiful and God Bless America until the harmonies locked in clean. Practice ended at 5:30. Carmen walked out with 2 other girls, Sarah Chen and Diana Reeves, heading for the student parking lot where Diana's older sister was supposed to pick them up. But when they reached the lot, Diana's sister wasn't there yet, stuck in traffic on I-40. "I'll just walk," Carmen said, adjusting the strap of her canvas book bag. "It's only a mile." "You sure?" Diana asked. "She'll be here in like 10 minutes. Carmen shook her head, already backing toward the street. "My mom needs help with dinner. She's working the late shift." She waved, turned, and started walking east on 16th Street, her choir folder tucked under one arm. Sarah Chen would later tell police that Carmen was humming as she walked away. Something from the rehearsal, she thought. Diana Reeves remembered that Carmen had been wearing her favorite jacket, the denim one with embroidered flowers on the back pockets that she'd bought with babysitting money over the summer. Neither of them saw Carmen again. By 7 o'clock, the kitchen at the Ortega house was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Maria Ortega stood at the stove, stirring a pot of beans that had been ready for an hour. Her younger sons, Miguel and Roberto, sat at the table doing homework, or pretending to. They kept glancing at the empty chair where Carmen always sat. "Maybe she went to Lisa's house," Miguel offered. Lisa Fernandez was Carmen's best friend since middle school. Maria had already called Lisa. Twice. At 7:30, she called the school. The line rang into an empty building. She tried Diana's house, then Sarah's. Both girls said Carmen had left right after practice, walking home. Maria stood at the front window, watching the street. North Hughes was a safe street. She knew every family on the block. Carmen walked home from school at least twice a week when Maria had to work late. It had never been a problem. By 8 o'clock, when the sky had turned the deep purple-black of a prairie night and the streetlights cast their pale yellow pools along the sidewalk, Maria picked up the phone again. Her hands shook as she dialed. "Amarillo Police Department. How may I direct your call?" "My daughter," Maria said, her voice tight. "She didn't come home." The first officer arrived at 8:47 p.m. Officer Kenneth Harper, 26 years old, 3 years on the force, took the report in the Ortega's small living room while Maria sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped in her lap. "And you last saw Carmen when?" Harper asked, his pen hovering over the incident form. "This morning, 7:15. She left for school." "Any arguments? Problems at home?" Maria's jaw tightened. "No. No problems. Carmen is a good girl. She studies. She helps with her brothers. She sings in choir." Harper wrote, "No domestic issues reported." "And she was supposed to come straight home after choir practice?" "Yes, she always does when I work late." "Does Carmen have a boyfriend?" "No." "Is it possible she went somewhere with friends? Maybe lost track of time?" Maria looked at him directly. I called her friends. I called the school. I called everyone I know. Carmen would call if she was going to be late. She always calls. Harper closed his notebook. Mrs. Ortega, I understand you're concerned, but in most cases like this, teenagers show up within a few hours. They go to a friend's house. They lose track of time. Carmen is 15 years old. It's Friday night. She should be home doing homework and helping me make dinner, and instead she is missing. Maria's voice didn't rise, but something in her tone made Harper straighten. You need to look for her. Harper nodded slowly. I'll file the report tonight. We'll have patrols keep an eye out. If she's not home by morning, we'll escalate to the detective division. After he left, Maria sat in the living room with all the lights on, waiting. Miguel and Roberto had gone to bed, but she could hear them whispering through the thin walls. The television played without sound. Every few minutes, she walked to the front window and looked out at the empty street. Carmen's choir folder sat on the coffee table. She'd brought it home the day before to practice. Maria picked it up, thumbed through the sheet music. Carmen had written little notes in pencil beside some of the measures. Breathe here, watch conductor, smile. The clock struck midnight. Carmen didn't come home. By Saturday morning, the case had been assigned to Detective Ray Harrison of the Criminal Investigations Division. Harrison was 42, a veteran investigator who'd worked everything from burglaries to homicides in his 16 years with the department. He arrived at the Ortega house at 9 a.m., a younger officer named Tom Valdez with him. Harrison interviewed Maria again, taking detailed notes. Height, 5'3". Weight, approximately 110 lbs. Hair, dark brown, straight, shoulder length. Eyes, brown. Clothing, blue jeans, white t-shirt, denim jacket with embroidered flowers. Shoes, white canvas sneakers. Carrying a canvas book bag, dark green, with her initials written in marker on the strap. Can I see Carmen's room? Harrison asked. Maria led them down the narrow hallway. Carmen's room was small but tidy. Twin bed with a crocheted blanket, a desk by the window, posters of Fleetwood Mac and the Bee Gees on the walls. The closet door stood open, revealing a modest collection of clothes hung neatly on wire hangers. Harrison checked the desk drawers. School notebooks, pens, a diary with a small lock. May I? He asked, holding up the diary. Maria nodded. The diary was ordinary teenage stuff. Complaints about homework, excitement about getting a solo in choir, observations about which boys were cute. The last entry was dated October 12th. Mrs. Henderson says I might be able to get into the all-state choir if I keep improving. Mom would be so proud. Need to practice breathing exercises. Harrison set the diary down carefully. Mrs. Ortega, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has Carmen ever run away before? Never. Any problems with drugs? Alcohol? No. Carmen doesn't. She's not like that. Any adult men in her life? Teachers, coaches, family friends? Maria's face hardened. No. No one. Harrison walked to the window, looking out at the small backyard. A rusty swing set. A clothesline. Nothing unusual. We're going to need a recent photograph, and I'd like to talk to Carmen's friends, anyone who saw her yesterday. I can give you names, Maria said. But please, you have to find her. By Saturday afternoon, Harrison and Valdez had interviewed Carmen's closest friends. The story was consistent. Carmen left choir practice at 5:30, walking east on 16th Street toward home. She'd been in good spirits, humming, wearing her denim jacket. They drove the route Carmen would have walked. 16th Street was a major road, 4 lanes with minimal sidewalk. Businesses along the north side, a Furr's cafeteria, a Woolworth's, a gas station, a strip mall with a Radio Shack and a dry cleaner. The south side was mostly empty lots and scrub grass, the land sloping down toward some railroad tracks. "Lot of places someone could have pulled over," Valdez said quietly. Harrison didn't respond. He was scanning the roadside, looking for what? A dropped book? A piece of torn fabric? There was nothing but fast food wrappers and beer cans, the usual roadside debris. They checked with every business along 16th. Nobody remembered seeing a girl in a denim jacket. It had been Friday evening, busy time, people coming and going. Even if someone had noticed her, would they remember 2 days later? At the Furs cafeteria, the manager pulled them aside. "You asking about that missing girl?" "You know something?" Harrison asked. "Maybe, maybe not." The manager, a thin man with thick glasses, shifted uncomfortably. "We had a guy hanging around the parking lot Friday evening, maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock, just sitting in his truck, watching people come and go. Made some of the waitresses nervous. You get a description? White guy, maybe 30s or 40s, dark hair, driving a blue pickup. Ford, I think. Texas plates, but I didn't catch the number." Harrison wrote it down. "This guy do anything? Approach anyone?" "Not that I saw, but he was there for like 20 minutes just watching. Then he drove off east on 16th. East, the direction Carmen had been walking. By Sunday, Carmen Ortega's disappearance was front-page news in the Amarillo Globe News. Teen girl missing after choir practice. Maria had provided the school photograph, and now Carmen's careful smile looked out from newspaper racks across the city. Tips started coming in. A woman claimed she'd seen a girl matching Carmen's description, getting into a blue pickup near 16th and Georgia Street around 6 p.m. Friday. A man said he'd spotted someone who might have been Carmen at a truck stop on I-40 Saturday morning. Another caller insisted Carmen was a runaway who'd been talking about going to California. Harrison followed every lead. The woman who'd reported the blue pickup couldn't provide a license plate number or a detailed description of the driver. The truck stop sighting turned out to be a different girl entirely. The runaway tip came from someone who'd never met Carmen. On Monday, Harrison organized a search. 50 volunteers, police officers, firefighters, concerned citizens spread out along 16th Street and the surrounding area. They walked the roadside, checked culverts and vacant lots, pushed through tangles of dry grass near the railroad tracks. They found nothing. By Tuesday, a week after Carmen's disappearance, the investigation was already slowing. Harrison had interviewed dozens of people, followed every lead, but he had no physical evidence, no witnesses who'd actually seen what happened, no clear indication of where Carmen had gone after leaving school. The case file grew thicker. Witness statements, search reports, photographs of empty roadsides, but no closer to answers. In his incident log, Harrison wrote, "No evidence of runaway. Subject's personal effects, money, and valued possessions remain at home. Family dynamics appear stable. No history of behavioral issues. Growing evidence suggests abduction scenario, but no witnesses, no physical evidence, no suspect identified. Case remains active." At the bottom of the page, he added a note that would stay with the file for 45 years. "Continue investigation. Do not close." The weeks turned into months. Maria Ortega took leave from her job at the hospital laundry to search for her daughter. She made posters, stapling them to telephone poles across Amarillo. She organized candlelight vigils at Palo Duro High School. She called Harrison every week. "Any news? Any leads?" The answer was always the same. "We're still investigating, Mrs. Ortega." By Christmas 1978, Carmen's disappearance had faded from the front page. By spring 1979, it was rarely mentioned at all. Harrison continued working the case when he could, but new crimes kept coming: robberies, assaults, other missing persons. The Ortega file sat on his desk, then moved to a filing cabinet, then eventually to storage. In March 1979, the Amarillo PD hired a new crime scene investigator, Richard Martinez, who'd trained in the latest evidence preservation techniques. One of his first tasks was reviewing unsolved cases to ensure physical evidence was being properly stored for future analysis. When he came across the Ortega file, he found only a few items: one red hair ribbon, collected from the roadside near where Carmen was last seen, a few fiber samples from the same location, photographs of the search area. Martinez read Harrison's notes. Then he did something unusual for 1979. He wrote a recommendation that the biological evidence be preserved according to protocols designed for future DNA testing, a technology that was still largely theoretical but showing promise in forensic journals. Date Harrison, he wrote. DNA testing may be viable in future. Preserve all biological evidence per attached protocol. Harrison signed off on the recommendation. The evidence was sealed, labeled, and stored in climate-controlled conditions in the basement of the Amarillo PD, and there it stayed for 44 years, while the world above changed, while technologies evolved, while Carmen Ortega's name faded from memory, becoming just another case number in a box marked unsolved. November 2023. Detective Marcus Webb spent 3 days working through the Ortega file. He started by pulling everything in the department's archive system, every report, every witness statement, every lead that had been followed in 1978 and 1979. The picture that emerged was of a thorough but frustrated investigation. Harrison had done everything right by 1978 standards. He'd interviewed witnesses, organized searches, followed every tip. But without physical evidence, without witnesses to the actual abduction, the case had hit a wall. Webb found Harrison's final report, dated December 1980. Despite extensive investigation, no evidence has emerged to indicate Carmen Ortega's current whereabouts or fate. Case remains open, but inactive pending new leads. The file had been touched a few times over the years, brief reviews in 1985, 1992, 2001, but nothing had come of them. Carmen Ortega had simply vanished, and the world had moved on. Webb checked to see if Detective Ray Harrison was still alive. He found an obituary from 2015. Raymond Douglas Harrison, retired Amarillo PD, died peacefully at age 78. The obituary mentioned his dedication to unsolved cases, his hope that advancing technology would one day solve the mysteries that had haunted his career. He would have wanted to know about DNA testing, Webb thought. Next, Webb tracked down Richard Martinez, the CSI who'd preserved the evidence in 1979. Martinez was retired but living in Amarillo, 72 years old now. Webb called him. "Mr. Martinez, this is Detective Marcus Webb with Amarillo PD. I'm calling about an old case you worked. Carmen Ortega, 1978? There was a long pause. "I remember Carmen," Martinez said finally. "I was new then, fresh out of training. That was the first missing person case I worked where we had physical evidence but couldn't do anything with it. You wrote a note about DNA preservation." "I did. I'd been reading about genetic fingerprinting. This was right when they were developing the technology in England. I figured, even if we can't use it now, maybe someday." He paused. "Did you find something?" "I found your evidence box, and I want to run the samples through modern DNA analysis. If there's any biological material on that ribbon, do it," Martinez said immediately. "God, I hoped someone would eventually. I used to think about that case, about Carmen. She'd be, 60 years old now? If she's alive," Webb said quietly. "Yeah, Martinez said. If she's alive? Webb sent the evidence to the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory in Austin. The ribbon, the fiber samples, everything Martinez had preserved in 1979. Along with the samples, he sent Carmen's toothbrush, retrieved from her mother's house, where Maria Ortega still lived, still kept Carmen's room exactly as it had been in 1978. Maria was 78 now, her hands shaking with age as she handed Webb the toothbrush sealed in a plastic bag. "You think you can find her?" she asked. "I'm going to try, Mrs. Ortega." "Her brothers," Maria said softly. "Miguel and Roberto. They're in their 50s now. They have children who never knew their Aunt Carmen. Every year on her birthday, we light a candle. We pray. We wait." Webb took the toothbrush carefully. "How do you keep hoping after 45 years?" Maria looked at him with eyes that had seen too much grief. "What else can I do?" 3 weeks later, the lab results came back. Webb opened the email in his office, reading slowly. The analysts had extracted DNA from blood on the ribbon, microscopic traces, nearly destroyed by time, but enough. They'd compared it to Carmen's DNA from the toothbrush. Positive match. The blood on the ribbon was Carmen's, but there was more. Mixed with Carmen's blood were traces of additional DNA. Male. Unknown. Webb leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. After 45 years, they had the DNA of Carmen Ortega's abductor. The next step was CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, the FBI's national database. Webb submitted the unknown male DNA profile. No match. Whoever this person was, they'd never been arrested for a crime serious enough to require DNA collection. But that didn't mean the search was over. In the past decade, genetic genealogy had revolutionized cold case investigation. Companies like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA allowed investigators to upload DNA profiles and search for familial matches, distant cousins, third or fourth degree relatives who'd submitted their own DNA for ancestry research. Webb uploaded the unknown profile to GEDmatch and waited. 2 days later, the system returned 17 potential familial matches. None were close. Most were third or fourth cousins, but they were a start. Webb contacted a genetic genealogist, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Carmen's friend from choir, who specialized in building family trees from DNA data. Dr. Chen worked for 3 weeks, tracing family lines through birth records, marriage certificates, census data. She built a tree with hundreds of branches, narrowing down the possibilities, looking for the point where all 17 matches converged. On December 8, 2023, she called Webb. "I have a name," she said. "Actually, I have 3 possible names. 3 men who fit the profile. Right age, right location in 1978, right family connections. Tell me." She read the names. The second one made Webb go still. "You're sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be without a direct sample. But yes, based on the genetic genealogy, this man is the most likely match." Webb hung up and sat in silence for a long moment. Then he pulled up the Amarillo PD personnel records from 1978. The name Dr. Chen had given him appeared in the files, not as a suspect, not as a person of interest, as an officer. Officer Kenneth Harper. The first responder who'd taken Maria Ortega's missing person report on the night Carmen disappeared. Webb spent the next 2 hours pulling Kenneth Harper's personnel file. The details painted a picture of an unremarkable career. Hired in 1976 at age 24, worked patrol for 8 years, transferred to traffic division in 1984, retired in 2001 with a decent record and no disciplinary issues. Nothing that would raise flags, nothing that would make anyone look twice. But Webb looked at the dates differently now. Harper had taken Maria Ortega's call on October 13, 1978, the night Carmen disappeared. He'd been first on scene, first to interview the mother, first to document the case. And then, 3 days later, he'd been reassigned to another district. Webb found the transfer request buried in the file. Officer Harper requests relocation to East District due to personal reasons. Personal reasons. 3 days after Carmen vanished. Webb pulled the original investigation reports. Harrison had interviewed Harper as part of the standard canvass, talking to every officer who'd been on duty that night, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual. Harper's statement was brief. Took the missing person report at the residence. Mother was upset. No signs of foul play at that time. Filed report and returned to patrol. Nothing suspicious, nothing that would draw attention. But now Webb read it differently. Harper had been the gatekeeper, the first filter through which every piece of information about Carmen's disappearance had to pass. If he'd wanted to steer the investigation away from himself, he'd been in the perfect position to do it. Webb picked up his phone and called Dr. Chen back. "I need you to be absolutely certain about this match. We're talking about a former police officer." "I understand," Dr. Chen said. "I've triple-checked the genealogy. Based on the familial DNA matches, Kenneth Harper is the most probable source of the unknown male DNA on Carmen Ortega's hair ribbon. The probability is approximately 97.3%. Not 100%. Nothing in genetic genealogy is 100% without a direct comparison. But 97.3% is as close as we get before confirmatory testing." Webb hung up and stared at Harper's personnel photo from 1978. A young man with dark hair and an unremarkable face, wearing the standard Amarillo PD uniform. He would have been 26 years old when Carmen disappeared. Young enough to be strong, old enough to be confident. And he'd had a badge. The next question was simple. Was Kenneth Harper still alive? It took Webb 20 minutes to find him. Kenneth James Harper, age 72, living in a small house on the outskirts of Amarillo in the Sleepy Hollow neighborhood. Retired 22 years, collecting a police pension. Widowed in 2015. No children, no criminal record of any kind. Webb pulled Harper's driver's license photo from the DMV database. The same face, weathered now, gray-haired, but recognizable. He was living less than 8 miles from where Maria Ortega still waited for news of her daughter. Webb walked down the hall to his lieutenant's office. "I need surveillance authorization," he said. "And I need it quiet." For 2 weeks, Webb and a small team watched Kenneth Harper. They documented his routine: grocery shopping on Tuesday mornings, lunch at Fur's cafeteria on Thursdays, the same Fur's where the manager had reported a man in a blue pickup watching the parking lot in 1978, church services on Sunday mornings at First Baptist. Harper lived alone. He drove a gray Honda sedan now, not a blue pickup. He waved to neighbors. He seemed like any other retired man in his 70s, ordinary, forgettable. But Webb was looking for something specific. He needed Harper's DNA, voluntarily discarded, to confirm the genetic genealogy match. Without it, they had nothing that would hold up in court. On December 19th, Harper went to Fur's for his Thursday lunch. 2 plainclothes officers were already inside, sitting 3 tables away. They watched Harper order the chicken fried steak special, eat slowly while reading a paperback Western novel, and leave a tip on the table. After Harper left, one of the officers retrieved his water glass and silverware, both still bearing his saliva and skin cells. They were sealed in evidence bags and rushed to the crime lab. 3 days later, 3 days before Christmas, the results came back. Direct match. The DNA on Carmen Ortega's hair ribbon belonged to Kenneth Harper. Christmas passed. Webb spent it reviewing the case file, building the prosecution timeline, coordinating with the district attorney's office. They needed to be careful. Harper had been a cop. He would know procedure, know his rights, know how to challenge evidence. But they had him. DNA didn't lie. On January 8, 2024, at 6:47 a.m., 6 unmarked vehicles converged on Harper's house in Sleepy Hollow. Webb led the arrest team himself, wearing a ballistic vest under his jacket, despite the fact that Harper had no history of violence, at least not on record. Webb knocked on the door. The sun was just rising, painting the flat prairie sky pink and gold. The door opened. Kenneth Harper stood there in a bathrobe and slippers, coffee mug in hand. He looked at Webb, at the other officers behind him, at the vehicles in the street. His face didn't change. "Kenneth Harper?" Webb said. "Yes. I'm Detective Marcus Webb, Amarillo Police Department. I have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1978 disappearance and suspected murder of Carmen Ortega." Harper set down his coffee mug carefully on a table by the door. His hand was steady. "I'd like to call my attorney." "You'll have that opportunity. Right now, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." Harper complied without resistance. As Webb cuffed him, he noticed something. Harper's expression hadn't changed. No surprise, no confusion, no protest of innocence. Just a kind of quiet resignation, as if he'd been expecting this moment for 46 years. "Do you understand why you're being arrested, Mr. Harper?" Harper nodded slowly. "Carmen Ortega. You remember her?" "I remember all of them." The words hung in the cold morning air. All of them. Harper was processed at the Potter County Jail. He declined to speak without an attorney present, which was his right. But those 4 words, "I remember all of them," echoed in Webb's mind. How many had there been? Webb returned to the evidence room and began pulling unsolved missing persons cases from the late 1970s and early 1980s, focusing on young women, focusing on cases where Harper had been on duty, focusing on the timeline between Carmen's disappearance and Harper's transfer to traffic division. He found 3 more. Angela Martinez, 17, disappeared November 1978, 1 month after Carmen. Last seen walking home from a school basketball game. Jennifer Calloway, 16, disappeared March 1979. Last seen at a bus stop on Western Street. Rebecca Suarez, 15, disappeared August 1979. Last seen leaving a summer job at a movie theater. All 3 cases had been investigated. All 3 had gone cold. And Kenneth Harper had filed witness statements in 2 of them. Webb sent evidence from all 3 cases to the lab. A scarf belonging to Angela Martinez, found near the railroad tracks. A button from Jennifer Calloway's jacket, found in an empty lot off I-40. A bracelet belonging to Rebecca Suarez, found near the Palo Duro Canyon overlook. He requested expedited DNA testing. While he waited, he focused on Carmen. Her case was the strongest. They had DNA, they had genealogical confirmation, they had a direct match to Harper. The others would come later. Harper's attorney was a sharp woman in her 50s named Patricia Reeves, no relation to Diana Reeves, Carmen's choir friend. She met with Harper in the jail's attorney conference room and emerged 2 hours later with a statement. "My client maintains his innocence. The DNA evidence is circumstantial and potentially contaminated given the age of the samples. We intend to challenge the chain of custody and the reliability of genetic genealogy as a forensic tool." It was the expected defense. Webb had prepared for it. But privately, Harper had told his attorney something else. Something Reeves was ethically bound to keep confidential, but that would eventually come out in court documents. "I was there. I don't deny that. But I didn't kill her. I tried to help her. It was the kind of statement that would sound like a confession to a jury. The DNA results on the other 3 cases came back in February. Angela Martinez, no DNA recovered from the scarf. Jennifer Calloway, DNA on the button was too degraded to test. Rebecca Suarez, partial DNA profile on the bracelet, insufficient for comparison. Webb felt the disappointment settle in his chest. Without physical evidence linking Harper to the other disappearances, they were only theories. Carmen was the case they could prove. But in his gut, Webb knew. Harper hadn't stopped with Carmen. He'd continued until something, fear, caution, guilt, had made him stop. The transfer to traffic division in 1980, the quiet retirement in 2001, the ordinary life in Sleepy Hollow. All of it was camouflage. The trial was set for June 2024 in the 320th District Court of Potter County. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney James Brennan, a veteran prosecutor who'd handled several cold case trials. The defense maintained Patricia Reeves. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Media from across Texas, some from national outlets, filled the press gallery. Maria Ortega sat in the front row with her sons, Miguel and Roberto, now in their 50s. Carmen's old choir friend, Sarah Chen, now a grandmother, sat near the back. Diana Reeves, the other choir friend, had passed away in 2019, but her daughter attended to represent the family. Kenneth Harper sat at the defense table in a gray suit, his silver hair neatly combed. He looked like someone's grandfather. He looked harmless. Brennan opened with a clear, methodical presentation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about science, patience, and the pursuit of justice across nearly half a century. In October 1978, Carmen Ortega was 15 years old. She sang in the choir. She helped her mother with her younger brothers. She walked home from school on a Friday afternoon and was never seen again. Behind him, the screen displayed Carmen's school photo. The careful smile, the choir uniform, the eyes that held so much hope. For 46 years, her family waited for answers. And now, through DNA evidence preserved by a forward-thinking crime scene investigator in 1979, we have those answers. The evidence will show that Kenneth Harper, then a police officer, now sitting before you, was the last person to have contact with Carmen Ortega. His DNA was found on a hair ribbon that contained Carmen's blood, and we will prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he is responsible for her disappearance and death. Reeves countered in her opening statement. The prosecution wants you to believe that technology from 2024 can definitively solve a case from 1978. But DNA evidence is only as reliable as its collection and preservation. We will show that the chain of custody for this evidence was broken multiple times over 46 years. We will show that genetic genealogy is an imperfect science, prone to false positives and statistical errors, and we will show that Kenneth Harper, a decorated police officer who served this community for 25 years, is innocent of these charges. It was a strong defense, but Brennan had something stronger: the evidence. The first week of trial focused on establishing Carmen's disappearance. Sarah Chen testified about leaving Carmen at the school parking lot, about how Carmen had been humming, how she'd been wearing her denim jacket with the embroidered flowers. Maria Ortega took the stand, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks, describing the hours she'd waited that Friday night, the phone calls she'd made, the moment she realized her daughter wasn't coming home. "Did Carmen ever run away before?" Brennan asked. "Never. She was my responsible one. She took care of her brothers. She called if she was going to be late even 5 minutes. And after she disappeared, did you ever stop looking for her?" Maria's voice cracked. Never. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day, I would sit at the window and think, maybe today she'll come home. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone crying in the gallery. The second week focused on the DNA evidence. Dr. Linda Washington from the Texas DPS Crime Lab testified about extracting DNA from the blood on the hair ribbon, about comparing it to Carmen's DNA from the toothbrush, about finding the unknown male DNA mixed with Carmen's blood. Can you explain to the jury the significance of finding mixed DNA on this ribbon? Brennan asked. It indicates physical contact between Carmen Ortega and the unknown male at the time she was bleeding. Given that the ribbon was found near where Carmen was last seen, and given the presence of her blood, this suggests a violent encounter. Dr. Sarah Chen, the genetic genealogist, testified about building the family tree from the unknown DNA, about the 17 familial matches, about the methodology that had pointed to Kenneth Harper, and what is the probability that Kenneth Harper is the source of the DNA on Carmen's ribbon, Brennan asked. Based on the genetic genealogy analysis, approximately 97.3%. Reeves cross-examined aggressively. But you said 97.3%, not 100%. That means there's a 2.7% chance you're wrong, correct? That's correct. Genetic genealogy provides probabilities, not certainties. And is it possible that the DNA on the ribbon came from someone else? A relative of Mr. Harper, perhaps? It's possible, but unlikely. The direct DNA comparison confirmed the match. But the direct DNA was obtained from a water glass my client used at a restaurant, correct? Without his knowledge or consent? That's correct. But abandoned property. I'm not asking about the legality, doctor. I'm asking about the science. Is it possible the sample was contaminated? All samples undergo strict protocols to prevent contamination. I can't speak to. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. It was a good cross-examination, but it didn't change the fundamental fact. Harper's DNA was on Carmen's ribbon. The third week brought the most damaging testimony. Detective Marcus Webb took the stand and walked the jury through the investigation, the discovery of the old case file, the decision to test the DNA, the genetic genealogy match, the surveillance of Harper, the arrest. When you arrested Mr. Harper, did he say anything? Brennan asked. Yes. When I informed him that he was being arrested in connection with Carmen Ortega's disappearance, he said, I remember all of them. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Reeves objected immediately. Hearsay, Your Honor. It's a statement by the defendant, Your Honor, Brennan countered. An admission. The judge allowed it. Detective Webb, Brennan continued, what did you understand Mr. Harper to mean by all of them? I understood it to mean that there were multiple victims. Reeves was on her feet. Objection. Speculation. Sustained. The jury will disregard the witness's interpretation. But the damage was done. The words hung in the air. All of them. On cross-examination, Reeves tried to reframe the statement. Detective Webb, isn't it possible that when Mr. Harper said, I remember all of them, he meant he remembered all the cases he worked as a police officer? It's possible, Webb admitted. In fact, Mr. Harper worked hundreds of cases over his 25-year career, correct? Correct. So this statement could have meant anything. It could have been completely innocent. It could have been. But Webb's tone suggested he didn't believe that, and neither did the jury, based on their expressions. The prosecution rested after 3 weeks. Reeves called only a handful of witnesses, character witnesses who testified that Harper had been a good officer, a good neighbor, a quiet man who'd never shown any signs of violence. She called a DNA expert who questioned the reliability of genetic genealogy, who pointed out the potential for error, who emphasized that 97.3% was not certainty. But she didn't call Kenneth Harper. In her closing argument, Reeves made a passionate plea. The prosecution has asked you to convict a man based on science that is not infallible, based on evidence that is nearly half a century old, based on probabilities and assumptions rather than facts. Kenneth Harper served this community for 25 years. He took an oath to protect and serve, and he fulfilled that oath with distinction. The prosecution wants you to believe he's a monster because of a DNA match that could be wrong, because of a statement that could be misinterpreted. But I ask you, where is the proof? Where is the body? Where is the evidence of murder? It was a strong closing, but Brennan's was stronger. Ms. Reeves is right about one thing, he said, standing before the jury with Carmen's photograph displayed behind him. We don't have Carmen's body. We don't know exactly how she died. We don't have video footage of the crime. But we have something better. We have science. We have DNA that places the defendant in physical contact with Carmen Ortega at the moment she was bleeding. We have a hair ribbon soaked with her blood, found near where she disappeared. We have a defendant who said, "I remember all of them," when confronted with his crime. Brennan paused, letting the words settle. Carmen Ortega was 15 years old. She had dreams of joining the all-state choir. She helped her mother raise her younger brothers. She walked home from school one Friday afternoon, and she never made it. For 46 years, her family has waited. For 46 years, they've asked, what happened to Carmen? And now we can answer that question. What happened to Carmen is that she encountered Kenneth Harper, and Kenneth Harper, a man sworn to protect her, instead took her life. Brennan turned to look at Harper. He has carried this secret for 46 years. He has lived a normal life, retirement, pension, quiet Sundays at church, while Maria Ortega sat at her window waiting for a daughter who would never come home. That ends today. Today, you have the power to give Carmen's family the answer they've waited for. Today, you can deliver justice. The jury deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. On June 27, 2024, at 3:15 p.m., they returned with a verdict. The courtroom rose as the judge entered. Maria Ortega clutched her son's hands. Webb sat in the back row, his stomach tight. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The foreman, a middle-aged man who'd taken notes throughout the trial, stood and read from a paper that trembled slightly in his hands. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we the jury find the defendant, Kenneth James Harper, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Not with cheers. There was no celebration in this, but with gasps, with sobs, with the release of tension that had built over 46 years. Maria Ortega collapsed against her sons, weeping. Harper showed no reaction. He sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Brennan argued for life without parole, citing the calculated nature of the crime, the betrayal of Harper's oath as a police officer, the decades of deception. Reeves argued for mercy based on Harper's age, his lack of prior criminal history, his service to the community. The judge listened to both sides. Then he spoke. Mr. Harper, you were a police officer. You took an oath to protect the citizens of Amarillo. Instead, you preyed upon a 15-year-old girl. You used your position and your badge to evade suspicion. And then you lived for 46 years as if nothing had happened, while Carmen Ortega's family suffered every single day. The judge paused. I have read the case file. I have read Detective Harrison's notes from 1978. expressing his frustration that he couldn't find answers. I have read Richard Martinez's note from 1979, hoping that future technology might solve this case. Those men believed in justice. They believed that truth would eventually surface. They were right. The judge looked directly at Harper. Kenneth James Harper, I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. May you spend the rest of your days contemplating the life you took and the lives you destroyed. The gavel fell. After the sentencing, Webb walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas summer sun. Maria Ortega was surrounded by reporters, but she spoke only briefly. Thank you to the police, to Detective Webb, to everyone who never gave up. Carmen can rest now, and I can finally stop waiting. A reporter asked, Do you forgive Kenneth Harper? Maria looked toward the courthouse, where Harper was being loaded into a transport van. I don't need to forgive him. I just needed to know. For 46 years, I didn't know if she ran away, if she was hurt, if she was still alive somewhere. Now I know. That's enough. Webb returned to the station and filed the final report. Case 78-0847 MP. Carmen Maria Ortega. Status: closed. Solved by DNA evidence. He thought about Detective Harrison, dead now for 9 years, who'd never known that his instinct was correct, that Carmen hadn't run away, that something terrible had happened. He thought about Richard Martinez, whose forward-thinking decision to preserve evidence in 1979 had made this case solvable 44 years later. And he thought about the 3 other girls, Angela, Jennifer, Rebecca. Their cases remained open. The evidence was too degraded to test, but Webb knew, in the way that cops sometimes just know, that Harper had been responsible for them too. I remember all of them. Webb opened Harper's personnel file one more time. He found the transfer request from October 1978, 3 days after Carmen disappeared. Officer Harper requests relocation to East District due to personal reasons. Personal reasons. Because he'd taken a girl's life and couldn't stand to work in the same district anymore. Because guilt, or fear, had caught up with him. Harper had stopped killing in 1979 when he transferred to Traffic Division. Away from patrol, away from the streets, away from opportunities. Maybe that had been intentional. Maybe even Harper, in some twisted way, had been trying to stop himself. But it didn't matter. Carmen was dead. Angela, Jennifer, and Rebecca were almost certainly dead. And Harper had lived free for 46 years. Webb closed the file and locked it in the evidence cabinet. The case was solved, but it would never really be over. Justice had been served, but it had come 46 years too late. Amarillo, Texas, July 2024. The Potter County Medical Examiner's Office released a statement in late July. Based on the DNA evidence and the circumstances of the case, Carmen Maria Ortega was officially declared deceased, with the date of death listed as October 13, 1978, the day she disappeared. A memorial service was held at Palo Duro High School. The choir, now made up of students who hadn't even been born when Carmen vanished, sang America the Beautiful, the song she'd been rehearsing the day she died. Maria Ortega sat in the front row, holding a framed photograph of her daughter. Beside her sat Miguel and Roberto, both crying. Behind them, 3 rows of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Carmen's extended family, people who'd heard stories about the aunt they'd never met. At the end of the service, the choir director, a young woman in her 30s, read a poem that Carmen had written in her diary, dated October 11, 1978, 3 days before she disappeared. When I sing, I feel like I'm flying. My voice carries me higher than worry, higher than fear. Someday I'll sing so well that everyone will have to stop and listen. and I won't be invisible anymore." The words echoed in the auditorium. Carmen had wanted not to be invisible. For 46 years, she'd been invisible. A name in a file, a photograph in a newspaper archive, a mystery with no answer. But now, finally, she'd been seen. Her story had been told. Her family had answers. She wasn't invisible anymore. The case of Carmen Ortega is more than a story about DNA technology and cold case investigation. It's a story about how evil can hide in plain sight, how betrayal can come from those sworn to protect, and how a community must reckon with uncomfortable truths. Kenneth Harper wasn't a stranger lurking in shadows. He was a police officer, someone the community trusted, someone who'd been invited into Maria Ortega's home to help find her daughter, all while knowing exactly what had happened to Carmen. The case raises difficult questions about authority and accountability. How many other cases did Harper touch during his career? How many investigations might he have steered away from the truth? The Amarillo Police Department conducted an internal review and found no evidence of other misconduct. But the shadow of suspicion remains. It's also a story about persistence. Richard Martinez preserved evidence in 1979 because he believed in a future he couldn't fully imagine. Detective Ray Harrison kept the case active even when leads dried up because he believed Carmen deserved answers. And Marcus Webb, 44 years later, refused to let the case remain buried in a basement storage room. Most of all, it's a story about a family that never stopped hoping. Maria Ortega waited for 46 years, longer than her daughter had been alive, for one simple answer. What happened to Carmen? Now she knows. And Carmen, silent for nearly half a century, has finally been heard. Epilogue: The Amarillo Police Department. In September 2024, the Amarillo PD Cold Case Unit was officially expanded, with funding for additional detectives and forensic analysts. The unit was renamed the Carmen Ortega Cold Case Division in honor of the case that had demonstrated the power of preserved evidence and modern technology. The department also implemented new protocols requiring all biological evidence in unsolved cases to be preserved according to the strictest standards, regardless of current testing capabilities. They call it the Martinez Protocol, after the CSI who'd had the foresight to preserve Carmen's evidence in 1979. Detective Marcus Webb was promoted to lead the division. His first priority, reviewing every unsolved missing person case from the late 1970s, looking for evidence that might still exist, that might still hold answers. Angela Martinez, Jennifer Calloway, and Rebecca Suarez remain officially missing. But Webb hasn't given up on them. DNA technology continues to evolve. Evidence preservation techniques improve every year. Someday, perhaps, their families will get the answers that Maria Ortega waited 46 years to receive. Because as Carmen's case proved, truth may be buried, but it never truly disappears. Time may pass, but evidence remembers, and justice, though delayed, can still find its way home. Thank you for following Carmen Ortega's story, a testament to the power of science, the importance of never giving up, and the truth that some silences must eventually be broken. Subscribe to explore more cases where the past refuses to stay hidden, and where patient investigators refuse to let time erase the truth.